Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 698, and today's date is June 22nd, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Getting Ready for the Economic Collapse with War. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we made it through the weekend, and Greece is still operating. They're still working on some type of deal. In the last minutes, we see that Greece has made a deal with Russia, a $2 billion euro deal, and this cash might come in handy in helping Greece maybe pay off the $1.5 billion that they owe at the end of June, because as you know, where else are they going to get the funds? Because we can see at this point in time, they are working on a deal with the Troika, IMF, the entire central banking system, the creditors, and they're trying to work out something. I think they're trying to buy some time here until the BRIC system is all completely up and running. They have all the deals with Russia, and eventually they're going to say, okay, we've had enough, we're moving on. But we can see in Greece that the outflows from the Greek banks, totaling about 6 billion euros, has been removed. And we see Monday withdrawals topped 1 billion euros. Capital controls are now in effect, where they only can take about 3,000 euros when they walk into the bank. They can say, okay, I would like to take out 10,000. No, you're not allowed to. You're only allowed to take out 3,000 euros. So there is some type of capital controls in effect right now because they're trying to keep as much cash as they possibly can in the banking system. We see the BBC out there, the economic editor Robert Peston, and he is saying that, Greece is rescued, they're agreeing on a deal, everything is fine once again. And right now, this hasn't really been confirmed. And he believes that Greece's new proposal to balance the government books will break the deadlock with the creditors. They didn't talk about austerity, pensions. They talked about new taxes on businesses, new taxes on the wealthy, some increases in the VAT rate on selected items. And we could see at this point in time that Greece will really not be out of the woods, even if they make a deal. Because all they're going to do is they're going to get another tranche of debt. It will mostly go, just like all the others, to the government to pay off all the creditors. And when that money runs out, because as we know, the unemployment is very high, they don't have the revenue coming in, they're going to be in the same situation. So to the world and to the corporate media and to everyone else out there trying to push this propaganda, they're going to make it seem like everything is fine. Just like they did back in 2008, 2010, 2012, 2014, and now 2015. They continually tell you it's okay as they take on more and more debt and the economy completely falls apart because there is no plan to create jobs to get the country back on its feet, because this is not what the central banking system is all about. It's all about putting them into debt. That's it. And we'll have to watch this situation very carefully because as we saw in the past, every time they tell us there's some type of deal or they're very close, nothing was worked out whatsoever because the Greek government is not doing what the central bankers want, and that is lay more people off, close more businesses, sell more of the natural resources over to the central bankers. That is what they want. And continually accept debt, just like Ukraine. Continually accepting debt. People are out of work. Currency is declining, imploding on itself. The economy is collapsing. But they'll just continually give them more debt because that's what they need. And this is how the banks work. We see here in the United States, what are we seeing? They're telling us that everything is fine. Real estate is booming. Existing home sales spiked to the highest since November 2009. And we can see at this point, April saw houses drop by 3.3%. We see a surge in sales in May of 5.1%, but we have to remember who is buying these homes. The investment companies, the hedge funds who are getting the free money from the Fed. These companies that aren't just buying one or two, they're buying thousands upon thousands of existing homes. to get them off the market, to hold on to them, to rent them. Because when I look around the country, you know what I see? And you can do this too. Just go onto Zillow, go into Northeast, and you can take a top aerial view of what is going on. You will see homes on the market for longer than a month, 2 months, 3 months. They're continually dropping their prices because it's starting to affect everyone. Now, is it happening in every single location all at once? No, that's not how it happens. It happens in select areas, and then it spreads across the country. And I'm seeing it in the Northeast. I'm seeing it in the Southeast. I'm seeing it in the Midwest and out in California. Yes, prices have hit the top. They are coming down. Traffic is drying up. We saw this back in 2006, moving into 2007, and then 2008. Of course, the corporate media and everyone told us that everything is contained, everything is fine, real estate always goes up, we don't see it going down. And what happened? The whole thing fell apart. We're seeing the same exact thing happen right now. I've been looking around the country, and I see people who thought their houses were going to sell in the first 3 weeks. They haven't gotten any traffic. No one's coming to look, and these are nice homes. And they've already lowered their the prices on the house $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And this will continue. And you have to remember, when we move out of this summer period, people are going to they're going to slow down in looking for a home. Things are going to start to fall apart rapidly. We saw this back in 2008, and we're going to see it once again. A fund manager for one of the largest mutual fund and investment groups in the world, Fidelity, has warned investors right now and savers to keep physical cash and precious metals to protect themselves against a systemic risk. They know what's coming. They realize that this system, the stock market, the housing, the student loan, the automobile industry, the bond market, this cannot be maintained. It's impossible at this point. He believes that the record debt that has been ballooning since the crisis of '08, due to interest rates being forced down to near zero by central banks, this debt, particularly where mortgages are concerned, would likely become unsustainable when rates rise to realistic levels. He points out that in such an environment, banks would be unable to sustain the losses caused by defaults on unserviceable debt, which would lead to a systemic crisis. Spreadbury is not the first high-profile financial expert to warn of this crisis. We see other people coming out. Stephen King, chief economist at the world's third largest bank, HSBC, has also said the same thing, that this market, everything that we're seeing right now, it looks like it's starting to fall apart and crumble. Not just here in the United States, but in the UK, throughout Europe. And they're saying the governments are getting prepared. The banks are getting prepared with their bail-in documents because they realize they cannot go to the government to bail them out. And this is why we saw the European nations who control the European banks tell 11 countries, listen, fall in line. This was Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Romania, Sweden, Luxembourg, Netherlands, France, and Italy. Get everything in line for these bail-ins because they are coming. We see in the Eurozone, it is inevitable that the European countries will have to hand over more sovereignty to guarantee the stability of the Eurozone. And this is coming from the 5 presidents of Europe in this new joint report. The 5 leaders stressed that the Eurozone must do more than survive, and that all citizens, companies, and member states must benefit from the euro. And countries will have to hand over their sovereignty. This is what the central bankers want. They want control of all the physical assets of the country. They want control of the countries. because they're giving the countries paper and ink, and they want the real hard assets. And we can see this is what they do to every single one of these countries. And they will not stop until they have it all, because they understand this is where the real wealth is. It's not in the paper and the ink. They create that out of thin air. They make you believe that that's worth something. But they know it's not. They know it's gold. They know it's silver. They know it's land. They know it's oil. They know it's land. They know it's all of that and not paper and ink. And we see these countries trying to raise revenue, tax the people more. They try all these different things. None of it's working. More and more people are being laid off. More and more people don't have a job, which means less and less revenue coming into the government, which means they need more debt. And we're seeing this throughout Europe and here in the United States. And this is where we got Obamacare. And we can see Obamacare was developed to bring in revenue, to have taxes intertwined into Obamacare. This is why we have the penalty. And we knew eventually, of course, as we know, the insurance companies, they help write the bill. And eventually what was going to happen is all of this was going to merge into one insurance company where they all worked together, agreed on prices, maintained control of the entire industry. And this is what we are seeing right now. Obama's dream of a single-payer socialized healthcare is getting closer by the day. Obamacare is creating oligopolies with the predictable result of higher costs, lower quality, and less innovation. The 5 largest commercial health insurers in the U.S. have contracted merger fever, and if the logic of Obamacare prevails, this exercise will conclude with all 5 fusing into one monster insurance company. This is what we are seeing right now. This is not a benefit to the people. This is not to give you health insurance to help you out. This is to bleed you, to control you. And we see this is exactly what we're doing. And this was all designed on purpose by Jonathan Gruber and many others. And of course, Obama was out there saying that, no, he had nothing to do with that. And I know we talked about this before, but the House Oversight Committee has released emails to the Wall Street Journal showing that Gruber had a far closer working relationship with the White House than it wanted to admit. And we knew this. The emails show frequent consultations between Mr. Gruber and top Obama administration staffers and advisors in the White House and the Department of Health and Human Services on the Affordable Care Act. They show the informed HHS about interviews with reporters and discussions with lawmakers. And he consulted with HHS about how to publicly describe his role. The emails show Mr. Gruber was in touch with key advisors such as Peter Orszag, who was the director of the Office of Management and Budget, an arm of the White House that oversaw federal programs. He also was in contact with Jason Furman, an economic advisor to the president, and Ezekiel Emanuel, who was then a special advisor for the health policy at OMB. One email indicates that Mr. Gruber was invited to meet Mr. Obama in July of 2009 because he wanted to talk to the head honcho about the cost control of Obamacare. And we know that this was all put together to benefit everyone else except the people of the United States. And Gruber was out there even saying this. And they know that this is completely unconstitutional. We know the NSA blackmailed the judges. We know that all of this was a complete setup. Just like the TPP, the TTIP, all the trade agreements that Obama is trying to push. If you notice, every time he tries to push something that's not in the benefit of the people, it's a secret. You can read it later. You don't need to read it now. Don't discuss it. And we're seeing the same thing occur. Because if it was truly in the best interest of the people, it would be open to everyone. It would be completely transparent. They wouldn't care because it benefits everybody. But this is not what's happening right now. This benefits nobody except the corporations, the central banks, and the people who wrote the bills. Now, we all understand that the NSA has their tentacles in many of the European countries, and we see in April an espionage scandal erupted in Germany when local media revealed that the intelligence agency BND had provided technical assistance to NSA in spying on targets inside the country and throughout the European Union, including, some top political figures and corporations. Following the scandal, the German Bundestag required the government to reveal a list of spying targets so that the Parliament's committee could proceed with an inquiry. On Wednesday, the German government proposed that only a special investigator would inspect the list and report it to the Parliament. Now, the United States does not want this list out there. It opposes even partial disclosure of the targets. And if they are disclosed, Washington would breach the agreement on cooperation between the security services with Germany. And we see they don't want certain names out there. We also see the NSA and GCHQ. They targeted Kaspersky. They wanted to reverse engineer the antivirus software in order to exploit such software and to prevent detection of their activities. So they didn't want the Russian Kaspersky antivirus software to detect what they were doing. So they were trying to reverse engineering. And this is coming from Edward Snowden's documentation more than 2 years ago. The Intercept reported Monday that the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, and the British government, GCHQ, teamed up to subvert antivirus and security software made by this company. And we could see at this point in time they were trying to get into and spy on whoever they possibly can. And again, a lot of everyday people use this software to protect themselves against against viruses. And we see they were trying to maneuver their way into it so they wouldn't be detected. And we all have to understand that the NSA, GCHQ, and many of the other countries are continually spying on the people because they're very nervous of what's going on. They use it for many different agendas. They just don't use it to blackmail government officials. They use it to see what everyone's talking about. They use it to find out what groups are talking about, maybe overthrowing the government. They're spying on the people to get investment ideas. And this is why everyone needs to protect themselves. I mean, I can't say this enough. I mean, use anything you possibly can to protect yourself. Use encryption. Use StartPage, which is a search engine which does it encrypted, or you can use a proxy server where people can't track where you're coming from. Use products like Block It Pocket, which is just a simple sleeve where you can slip your phone in so they don't trace you wherever you go. I mean, it has other added benefits. The material is interwoven with like silver and copper, and it blocks the harmful radiation. You can also use it to block the signals from your credit card so nobody can scan your information. You can keep it in there. You can also use it for the new state licenses that are being issued by DHS that has that RFID chip in there. It will block that signal so you cannot be traced. So there are many good uses, and there are many different things you can do to protect yourself. And this is something that everyone needs to think of and everyone needs to do. So you can go to blockitpocket.com, you can go to startpage.com, you can go to any tutorials teaching you how to encrypt. Actually, you can take a lot of your important files on your computer and you can just encrypt them, where it will set up an encryption with a key, and it'll make it very difficult for the NSA and others to get into your system and to find your important information. And everyone should be doing this. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand the situation is not getting better there. We realize that the Ukrainian government is completely falling apart. They owe a huge payment to Russia, and the IMF is ready and willing to bail them out and send them deeper and deeper into debt. But when we look at the situation with the IMF and Ukraine, we realize that the IMF is violating their own IMF rules. Because under their rules, they have lending restrictions. whose purpose was to reduce the riskiness of the IMF's lending. And their first rule is the IMF does not lend to nations at war. And right now, Ukraine is at war. They have been with the terrorists. But Ukraine continues being at war against Donbass, even though there is the Minsk II agreement, but the IMF doesn't care. The second rule, the IMF does not lend to nations that are likely to default. And Ukraine is on the verge of defaulting. They have no economy. Their currency is failing. They're at war. Their GDP is in the negative double digits. But the IMF steps in with no problem whatsoever and continually breaks their own rules and lends money to Ukraine because they're under orders from the U.S. government, central bankers, to continually do this. They want that country. They want the southeastern region. They want Crimea. And they need to keep this country operating. And this is why we see Kiev has made their 75 million interest payment on the 3 billion euro bond debt to Russia, thus avoiding their default this time. But they have other creditors. And the IMF, the United States, the ECB continually loan Ukraine more and more, which does not help the economy. It only puts them further into debt. We see a top general, Kolomik, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, discovered that the combat readiness of the Ukraine army was very low. People were stressed, and he defected. He switched sides. He went over to the Donetsk Republic, and he left the Ukrainian government. And he says other generals and other high-ranking military officers feel the same way, but they're very nervous because you cannot speak out against what's going on. Most of the people do not want this war in Ukraine. Who wants the war? It's the bankers. The people don't want the war. They don't want to go up fighting against their own people. They could have relatives who are in that area. They don't want to be fighting against them. They're friends. People who live together in peace at one time. It is the central bankers that are continually pushing this. And the U.S., who's behind a lot of this, will continue to help the armed forces of Ukraine until the Russian aggressor leaves Ukraine territory. And this is coming from the U.S. Ambassador, Jeffrey Pyatt. They're going to continually give them aid, training, and we know John McCain is in Ukraine, and this means only one thing. They're getting ready to push war. Because you have to remember they need certain groups to continually push war in there, and we see Ukraine's right sector has rejected the Minsk deal. They are calling for a renewed offensive in East Ukraine. And they're pushing, and they're not waiting. They have already started attacks. They're already getting ready to push another offensive, with or without the government. And what will happen is, as they push this, the government will have no choice but to join in. And it's very interesting that all of this is happening just as McCain visited Ukraine. And we will see something occur very soon in this area, because as we know, the central bankers did not get what they paid for. Now, out in the Black Sea, we see a U.S. Navy warship, USS Laboon. It is going to enter the Black Sea as part of its support mission for the Operation Atlantic Resolve drills, which are intended to counter the alleged Russia threat. The American warship is equipped with 2 Aegis ballistic missile defense systems capable of deploying long-range Tomahawk subsonic cruise missiles, and that will be entering the Black Sea. We know they only can stay there for 21 days because the United States is not a state actor in the Black Sea, and they have to abide by the Montreal Convention, which tells them that they only can stay in there for 21 days, and then the ships have to leave. So we can see ships are moving in and out for these drills. Of course, it's to flex muscle, to show Russia that, yes, we are here, and we're ready for anything Of course, Russia's not doing anything, and this is all propaganda to make everyone think that, yes, Russia is very aggressive. And we know the EU, the US has kept sanctions. They extended the sanctions. So the Russian government right now has submitted proposals to extend the food embargo. They're not adding more food to the embargo. They're just extending the time frame of the food embargo. And again, they're going to continue with this. And this is only going to hurt the European nations. We see Belgium has decided to not block the Russian assets like they said they were going to do. And they're going to unblock the Russian embassy accounts that have been frozen over legal claims by shareholders of the former oil company Yukos. And it looks like some type of agreement was worked out, and they're no longer blocking this. I don't know about France at this point in time. I haven't heard any news if they're going to unblock. Most likely they probably will. We see more and more weapons are headed off to Eastern Europe. The U.S. will provide special operations aircraft and weapons for NATO's Rapid Reaction Force based in Europe. This is coming from Secretary Ash Carter. Washington will continue intelligence, surveillance capabilities, special operations, logistics, transport aircraft, and range of weapons. NATO is beefing up its forces in this area. The U.S. is adding more military assets to this area. This is all in preparation for war. And they're just waiting for that event to kick it all off. And if they can't get a country, if they cannot provoke a country, the United States government central bankers will create some type of false flag event. Of course, they will create it and blame it on the other country or group and say they did it. And this will kick off World War III. We see U.S. is going to station 1,200 special forces in Asia. These are special forces troops in the Asia Pacific to contain China. So we see 60% of the fleet is moving to the Pacific. We see more and more bases are being created to contain China. And we're seeing special force troops are headed off to this region. We see the U.S. has approved a $69 million sale of radar-destroying missiles to Australia. The sale includes 14 of the AGM-88B and 16 of the AGM-88E versions of the anti-air defense missiles. And of course, as we know, all of this is being done and prepared to contain China and to eventually join the coalition to go into Syria when the time comes. Now, we also see in the Middle East, as we know, the Islamic State, which is the proxy army of the United States government central bankers, Israel, UK, and other countries. They somehow filter into Syria. And we're starting to get information from Kurdish forces. They discovered tunnels leading from Turkey into Syria, where the Islamic State maneuvers and gets into Syria. And we see at this point in time that the forces now are surrounding Assad. They have forces coming in from the north. They have forces coming in from the east because they've taken a lot of that land. Remember, the United States and the coalition forces, they are acting as the air force to the Islamic State, and they have bombed the infrastructure in this area. They cleared the path, the area, so they can maneuver into the west. And we see, with Israel's help, the Free Syrian Army is making a push towards the north. So they definitely are surrounding. The propaganda is running wild right now, and they are definitely getting ready to make a move in Syria. Just like in Ukraine, we're approaching the August month, and all indicators are definitely pointing to this time period. Now, things can change as we move along. Nothing's written in stone. These are not gods. They're central bankers. They have plans. A lot of their plans do not work out, and they have to revise them, but the goal is always the same. But at this point, it looks like we are headed for that event, and we're going to have to watch this very carefully as things unfold. We also understand that there are other agendas at work, especially here in the United States. Of course, they're trying to limit the rights, actually trying to get rid of the rights of the people, remove the Constitution. We saw another false flag event in Charleston, and as we look into this situation further and further, things are really not making sense. We know the president is pushing gun regulation through executive action. He will do it without Congress. He does not care. He has a pen, he has a paper, and he is getting ready to create more executive orders. We also understand that Dylan Storm, he joined the Bible study session for an hour at the AME church on the evening of June 17th, prior to opening fire on the unsuspected group. So he shot 9 people, leaving a lone witness alive so she could tell the story of what happened. And what's very interesting about this is that he was such a great shot, there was no one injured. Everyone was shot dead, which is very, very interesting. Strangely, at the beginning of the manifesto, linked to Roof, there is, of course, a reference to death of Trayvon Martin and the Zimmerman trial. And they're trying to create this into a race war. Now, we looked at this manifesto and the site it was on, the last Rhodesian, and things don't make sense. It was created back in February 9th of 2015. The Wayback Machine, as we've shown in Saturday's report, it shows 5 snapshots only on June 20th. There was no other snapshots of this website existing, because as soon as there's a website that's put up, the Wayback Machine comes over, takes a snapshot. Under Google, only 2 pages are crawled, the homepage and his manifesto. Nothing else. But when we look at the source code of the website, we find out very interesting things. We find out that this site was created by Parallels Presence Builder, and the domain was registered in Russia. Why in the world would Dylan Roof register the website in Russia? And what's also very interesting, on the homepage of this site is a dead body with a Nazi symbol. So all of this seems not to be making sense, especially this Russian thing. Why wouldn't he go to GoDaddy? Why wouldn't he go to HostGator? Why wouldn't he go to any of the popular domain registering sites and hosting companies? Why did he pick, or whoever put this up, pick Russia? So something doesn't fit right here. And why was this website created this year, but there was no site, just a domain purchase? And why was the snapshots only taken on the 20th? And what's even more interesting about this entire thing is that there was an active shooter drill at the same time. This was taking place on June 19th in Charleston, South Carolina. So this was through DHS. So it seems at this point in time, when we put all of these dots and we draw the marks to all these dots, it's starting to look like this was a complete setup, which we kind of knew, to push certain agendas. This is what we're seeing right now. And this is why the president came right out there and pushed gun control. They didn't look at that he was on drugs. They didn't look at, where did this person come from? They didn't look at anything. All they're looking at is one thing, and that is their agenda: push race wars. Because if you notice through the corporate media, they're not saying, oh, we need peace, we need to get along. All you hear is race war, black and white, hate crimes. That is it. That's what they're pushing. Then, on the other hand, they're pushing gun control. They're going after handguns now, just like they went after assault rifles. They're doing whatever they possibly can to push the agendas, to get the things they need done before this entire system collapses. Because they know if the American people are unarmed, it is much easier to control them. And if you noticed, most of all of these mass shootings are those people who are taking some type of prescription medication, SSRIs. If you notice, a lot of these mass shooters have some type of connection with the FBI, and they become patsies for the FBI. We see it with the Islamic State, where they're saying they're capturing all these people, and we know, no, these are people where the FBI had some type of middleman that worked with this person, set them up, and we see the same things occurring with these false flag shooters. And if you notice, all of these false flag shooters all seem to look the same. They're all very young. They're all a little mentally unstable. They're on medication. These are perfect candidates for the FBI to make these people do things they normally wouldn't do. And this is exactly what we're seeing. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.